Compliance is a profession where people work tirelessly to make the world a better place. And there are hundreds of amazing and inspiring women who have helped the field develop into what it is today. Great Women in Compliance is part of the Compliance Podcast Network, so join Mary Shirley and Lisa Fine as they talk with women in compliance who are making a difference.
Welcome to the Great Women in Compliance podcast with Lisa Fine and Mary Shirley. I'm Mary Shirley, and today I'm featuring Alexis Wermuth, who heads up the compliance function in North America for Getinge. Alexis is actually a former colleague of mine, and I really miss working with her. So it was such a treat to be able to collaborate on this together and hear about some of Alexis's considerable knowledge and expertise. So welcome, Alexis. Please tell us about your background and journey to where you are today.
Hi, Mary. So honored to be here on the Great Women in Compliance podcast. I know you've hosted so many other really amazing women, so my honor to be here. I'm sorry, what was your first question? You want to start again?
I kind of don't want to start again because I thought that was glorious. The first question is tell us about yourself.
It's been a long week.
Oh dear. Oh my God, hasn't it? Alexis and I, it's not our first time speaking this week. So, she's right. It has been a really long week for both of us. And it was really good to get that laugh out because it hasn't been the best of weeks in certain respects. So,
we can keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Alexis.
To tell you about myself?
Yes. Take your time.
All right. Oh, tricky question. Philosophical, I guess. No, all right. So about me, we're here. I head up ethics and compliance at Getinge for North America, which for those of you who don't know about this company, because I feel like a lot of the sub companies are well known, but not this one, but it's a company that specializes in medical devices, all kinds of things that you see in the ER, for example, the OR, all kinds of hospital spaces. Recently, they were featured on Chicago Med, I think. So you can see, those kinds of things. But so I have had a bit of a windy path to compliance, but I think, honestly, nothing has been wasted in my experience. It's been a funny thing. I kind of which is a bit funny to me, but I back when, I guess you could say, I studied my undergraduate, I was really into science. And so my undergraduate degree was in, I have a Bachelor of Science in biopsych neuroscience, which all about the brain and fun things like that and trying to figure out how things work, which I found fascinating. But I didn't really like some of the practical aspects of going into that field, things like spending a lot of time in the lab and working with rats and things like that. It just wasn't for me. So I graduated with a bachelor's degree and decided not to pursue an advanced degree in that career field. And so what I did was what a lot of people do when they try to figure out their life out of school. And I did all kinds of odd jobs. And I'm only mentioning this because I think it really ended up contributing to where I am now. So I did all kinds of things. I worked for a bookstore for a while and did some management and retail experience, sales type of experience. I was a substitute teacher for a while, and I taught all the way from kindergartners up through high school, and really learned how to really convey information in a unique way, especially to people who didn't feel like listening to me, I guess you could say. And then I worked for a couple of years in hospital administration, not super senior or anything, but really learning how hospitals work from the inside out and how the payment systems work and things like that. And I decided after that, I was like, I decided that wasn't really the career path for me. And that I thought, I really still enjoyed science, and I was trying to find a way to use that in a way that would be a nice career path for me. So I decided that I wanted to be, at the time, a patent lawyer. I was really, I've always been fascinated by the way things work, and I always thought it was really interesting to know about things where they happen. See the new small bit of technology that could one day help cure cancer or something like that, and be in the know and have that hope for the future. That was what I really liked about it. So I decided that I wanted to go to law school, but I didn't want to go all day long and have that be my sole focus. I really wanted to make sure that I continued building my career. I worked when I was in college, and I've always had a job. So what I did was I got into a law school that I went to at night. I went to New England School of Law in Boston, and I was able to go there in the evenings. Part-time was, I think, 4 classes instead of 5, so it was still a bit of a heavy load, but I wanted to get some more practical experience. And so I volunteered actually at the time at a biotech company to learn more about patent law. I wanted to just see what the day-to-day was like, see what practically my future life could be. So I volunteered my time, and I learned all kinds of things. I guess was so enthusiastic, they ended up offering me a position there. So I worked as an IP paralegal actually while I was in law school. They gave me that position after I'd been volunteering and shown my value there. So I worked directly with the the chief patent officer, or chief patent counsel rather, and an administrator. I also learned how to prosecute trademarks, which you don't need to be a lawyer to do. And it was a lot of really great educational experience, and I learned a lot about day to day. Once again, though, I realized that even though I think I have a lot of introverted tendencies, I was not introverted enough, I think, to be a patent lawyer. There's a lot of background and documentation back and forth with the trademark office, and that's really wonderful for a lot of people who want to do that. But I tended not to be a back office person, so I was like, well, what do I do with this? So I graduated from law school, and I passed the bar and everything. And then the market crashed. That was back in 2009. And there was nothing. Like, there were literally no jobs. It's the first time I've ever done a Google search and literally found 0 hits. I was actually surprised. And I was in a weird quandary because I was now a lawyer. So nobody would hire me as a paralegal again, because I'd paused my job there to study for the bar. And then there were no lawyer jobs. So then I was like, well, what do I do with myself? So I did some contract work, which is not on my resume. It was really, not great. What you do as a baby lawyer stuff. So that'll just remain silent now. But I ended up trying to figure out what to do with myself. And I went and talked to anybody who I knew who had a connection to the law to try to figure out where I wanted to go. And I met with all kinds of people. And the funny thing is that I ended up talking to my mother, of all people, who is, you always go to your mom for advice. And this is not where I thought I was going to go for career advice, but she's a nurse practitioner. And she said, hey, do you remember this woman who you worked with when you were at the hospital? And I was like, yeah, I remember her. And she said, well, you didn't know this at the time, but she was in law school and she's now a compliance officer. And I said, well, what the heck is compliance, right? Because back then it was not a thing. And so I met with her and I found out about compliance, and I thought, wow, what a cool field, because she was telling me all about how one of the things I didn't like about IP was that I felt like it was the same thing day after day. It was different, slightly different applications, but the same rote day-to-day kind of thing. Right. I didn't like that. I liked variety, right? And but she was telling me, she's like, well, no, every day is different. She said, it's not like firm. You're not working crazy hours doing things for clients, which, all the power to you if that's your calling. But she said, no, one day I'm doing training and teaching people. One day I'm investigating things. One day I'm coming up with plans. And she said, every day is different. And not only that, but you can have some work-life balance. And I thought, well, heck, that sounds awesome. It sounded like a dream career, right?
Right.
So I searched for compliance jobs, not legal jobs, compliance jobs. And I found the one at Fresenius. They were hiring one of their first associate positions, which they considered at the time to be not partner, anyway. So, but so I saw that position and I thought, oh my gosh, this is medical. It's in a medical device and it was for medical device and pharma. And it was also an opportunity to use my law degree, to use my undergraduate degree, because now I had science background to understand the technology, to understand the pharmaceuticals that were sold. I had the teaching, which helped me learn how to do training. I had the retail experience, which helped me learn how to interact with salespeople. I also have a lot of family in sales that helped too. But I just felt like a lot of the things that I've been doing really led me to being in compliance. That's the long way of saying how I got into compliance. And then I was with Fresenius for almost a decade, I think, a little over 9 years, where I worked with you. And then it just, just so happened that I had an opportunity to speak at a conference in Chicago, at a med device conference. And I happened to be in a session where my future boss at the time was also a speaker, and we connected there. And she said, "Hey, I'm trying to build up the compliance function in North America. Would you be interested in interviewing for the position?" And I did, and I've been here ever since. So that's my little story there of how I got to where I am within the compliance field. And I've been here for a little over 2 years, and yeah, still going.
That time has really flown by, and it's not unusual on the show for someone to describe what I call a perfect storm of circumstances that lead to compliance destiny. And I think yours are very different to mine. So for me, my background was investigations, data privacy, and antitrust. And I felt like that was helpful to set me up to then move on to the anti-corruption space. But it's so interesting to hear so many of our great women in compliance really have, and even though the story might be a bit different, but circumstances that really pull them towards the field. And I've said this before, but I really believe that compliance attracts people with the heart for it. And you're certainly one of those people. So glad that our paths crossed, and obviously continue to do so. You are very strong in the medical device space. That's really your niche area. Can you please tell us about the key risks for medical device companies?
Sure. Well, so medical devices, are products that are used with patients to help treat certain conditions, diseases, and things like that. So you have the typical kinds of things like you'd have for other FDA regulated products. So of course, the FDA regulatory framework, a bit of the FTC to make sure you're promoting your products consistently with what they do. And then the FDA side, consistent with what has actually been shown to be safe and effective, so that you're communicating things in a way that will really ensure as much as possible the safe use of that product. And because in the United States we have a reimbursement framework, you have some similar risks that you also see in other compliance programs related to healthcare fraud and abuse. So the Kickback Statute, False Claims Act, just from the vendor perspective as opposed to the service provider perspective. But a lot of those rules are bidirectional anyway, so they go both ways. We also have the Sunshine Act to make sure that we're reporting some of the interactions, the transfers of value between interactions with healthcare professionals and the company to the federal and sometimes state governments. Of course, the FCPA, we have products where we market outside of the United States, interact with government officials, and then a dash of HIPAA, which ordinarily you wouldn't think would apply, but because some of the products are used in a hospital setting, oftentimes you end up with an interplay where there may be access to data. So not in a classic HIPAA context, but more like a business associate type of context. So that's some of the big legal framework that we deal with. So I think that's similar to some others. It's really interesting to me. I think medical devices followed pharma in a way as far as the regulatory enforcement. So you saw things like the pharma code before the AdvaMed code and tightening up on things. And you also see things where, from a compliance program perspective, there's the guidelines for compliance programs for pharmaceuticals, and there's a similar one for durable medical equipment, but there actually isn't one for medical devices. And so oftentimes you see med devices following pharma or looking to enforcement actions in the pharmaceutical space to kind of use that as a crystal ball to see where enforcement will be going in the device space. It's a good idea to do that a bit. You can do it a bit too much, though. I think at some point you have to recognize that devices are very different from drugs. I mean, it's instead of having an injectable or a pill or something, these are actually products that you have to tangibly, physically learn how to use to be able to use them on a patient or with a patient. And so that's one thing where I think one of the key risks here is not knowing your products and not knowing how they're utilized in the field, because the company that I work for has a really wide variety of product types. And to me, I think really understanding how our sales representatives or how our medical teams, medical affairs would interact with those healthcare professionals and healthcare organizations, it's very different here from the way it would be with a drug. So in all kinds of different contexts. So to me, I think that is one of the I want to say key risks, but key things to keep in mind is to really understand those dynamics and understand the real needs of being able to communicate about these products and educate on them, because the risk profiles end up being a little different and somewhat unique from the drug world, which I think is what makes it much more varied and fun, actually. Since I did, some of the pharma when we were at Fresenius too, and I think the device is just much more dynamic.
I like how you juxtaposed the two of them to help compare and contrast. And good mention of the AdvaMed code. That's a nice place to look for anyone who, any of our student listeners or looking to move into a new space. That's a great resource.
Mm-hmm. We just joined this year, the company.
Getinge cool. You're
this year.
A member
so I was very,
now.
very excited about that. Yeah.
That's great. And I know that, a lot of companies, even before they become members, they do at least try to follow the codes because they are a lot of the time best practice. And, obviously competitors are holding themselves to those standards. So it's a good thing to know about, even if you're not yet a member, but cool to see that you guys have moved in that direction.
Yeah.
So turning now to you as a compliance professional, we had a lot of fun working together on Lisa Estrada's cross-pollinated marketing team, which is great because I was not in the medical device area, as you know, in our department. And so we wouldn't typically have crossed paths until working in this project group together. And I am not a very artistic or creative person, and I was so thankful that you are, because it was so necessary, I think, for that type of comms work, that outreach and advocacy. And so one of your greatest strengths is ideation, and I think that's obvious in having worked with you, but I also believe it's one of your strengths finder strengths. I didn't even know that was one of the options.
It is, yeah.
And it's right up the top of yours. So, and then even when you were talking before about patents, when you think about that, even though it's this, you mentioned the same rote process, which I totally understand, but I can see the allure for you because that's really to do with, innovation, new ideas, creative things. And so that it's interesting to me, a lot of people don't really know what they want to do with themselves, but throughout your journey that you described, you were hyper conscious of what would appeal to you. And you made really, strong decisions about, I thought I wanted to do this, so I gave it a try. And then, I think what happens to a lot of us is that we kind of double down on our commitments, or we feel like, I can't treat this as sunk costs. I said I was going to be a doctor, so now I'm going to be a doctor for life kind of thing. Whereas you were really, I think thoughtful about saying, okay, I gave this a try and I thought it was for me, but I decided that after doing it for a while, it wasn't. And so you changed gears pretty decisively and have been very strong at ensuring that you are constantly reassessing your career until you found your sweet spot really of compliance. So I find that really interesting with you. And it's something that I hadn't thought of before, but now that we're mentioning it here, I'm actually going to keep a lookout for how that might inform your style as a compliance officer. So with the ideation piece, some of us are not naturally creative, and I'm one of those people. So as someone who is, I'd love to hear your advice for tapping into creativity, especially when it comes to innovating in compliance programs.
Sure. But first thing, I do feel like I needed to correct the record because you are indeed creative. I remember when you were in APAC, your examples were the ones they showed to us as the examples of a really nice way to communicate compliance messaging. So,
thank you.
So that you know that. This was before you came to the United States, but
yeah.
Just had to correct that because you are very creative. But no, for me, I absolutely. I think creativity to me is one of the positive things. People oftentimes compare the compliance department to the legal function. And, a lot of us are lawyers. I am, you are. But I think one of the fun things about being in compliance is that you can be creative and you can try to find a way to communicate about rules, about structure, about decision making in a way that is really fun and it's more innovative than, say, trying to find a new way to structure a contract or something, which can bring you some intellectual joy, but it's not the same. It's not the same kind of thing, right?
Right.
But I really think that it's really fun to be able to think about things from your audience perspective and think, if I were in this role, what would I need to know, or what would I find interesting or meaningful for me, or what would I find funny or memorable or something like that, and try to tap into that and think about your audience and then come up with something that you think will be well received. And and you mentioned my way of trying things. Sometimes you try things, they fall flat and humor doesn't work, but oftentimes you find something that really hits a nice note and it becomes a memorable way of people remembering what compliance is about and really viewing us as a nice business partner as opposed to the people in the office or the sales prevention squad or whatever they call them. But really trying to build that positive relationship and doing that in a creative way.
Awesome. I like to listen to people like you to hear ideas. And one of the things I think, works well in a team environment where there's psychological safety to share things and not get immediately shot down is that even if you're not like a super creative person, sometimes hearing someone else share a great idea and then it's inspirational for another person to leverage off it or take some kind of a twist on it and say, oh, what if we did this to that idea? So I think reading books in the area of compliance is helpful, attending conferences to hear what other people are doing. There are, at many conferences, there are slots on, what someone did for their compliance week. And sometimes the exact thing that they did is not going to work for your company, but just hearing it and going, oh, I know how to tailor that for our company. So you're a great person to keep an eye on for these kinds of things, great person to connect with, to get ideas. And so where someone might be lacking in that area, I would recommend finding thought leaders in the space, and attending sessions and reading books of people giving concrete examples of success stories and then figuring out how it might work in your compliance program. And so now that I've just said that, I'm going to tap into your examples and say, Alexis, what are some of the things that you've done either over the years or more recently that you want to tell us about that people could replicate for their own program?
Oh, sure. Let me think. I think that one of the fun things is to be able to find ways to integrate compliance into existing events. One of the main goals I feel like a lot of us have is to be seen as a common part of daily practice, not some additional thing that you have to do, but that you're thinking about concepts like responsible leadership or what you need to do from the compliance space in your day-to-day work. So some of the things that I've done, I've tried to take advantage of that. So of course, we do compliance weeks and things like that. But one of the things that we did recently was at the sales meeting, we had a booth there where you'd have, the new people come in, they get the sales guys get their company car, their iPad, all of that stuff. But we also had a fun booth there and it was all part of the same process. So it's really seen as one of those important key things that you do when you first start with the company, which I really appreciated. And we made it fun. We had a spin the wheel, like a sort of like a wheel of fortune kind of thing. I don't know. Spin the wheel, maybe Vegas style. I don't know how you'd call it. But we had the elements of our code of conduct on there and we were able to have you could answer some questions. So you'd spin it and you'd choose one of the element types. And so one of them will say, speak up if something isn't right. And then you could answer a question about a scenario there and get some candy or a little prize or something like that. That was fun. And it was also a way for us to to try to be a little bit more technologically savvy, I guess you could say, we created a QR code, which I guess for those of you who do it all the time, it wasn't a big deal, but for me, I felt very techy. But there are so many ways online that you can create QR codes. And so you can find ways for people to link to things really easily. So there's no excuse. They don't have to download. So we were able to create a QR code for our code of conduct, which was online. So everybody who was there, they all now had that link saved in their phones with our contact information and everything, which was really great. Way to integrate as part of that. Some other things I did. So I always try to connect to pop culture as much as I can. I think there's a lot of space to do things internally for parody or for fun use. So for our IP listeners, I won't go into detail, but there's some really funny things that you can do. And I've done with references to pop culture or movies or things like that, where you can really integrate that in, and it makes it a memorable way of communicating compliance information. And also it shows a bit of fun. I think anytime we can humanize ourselves with our colleagues in the business functions, that it really helps to build that relationship with them and to show that we're all on the same team here. We just approach things from a different perspective. So I think that's always been a positive way. But I'm always up for ideas too. So if anybody wants to brainstorm with me, I'm game.
Awesome. Yeah, please connect with Alexis if you would like to ruminate on some of these innovations. And I think one thing that we found worked really well that I wasn't expecting such a big response to was that we flipped it and we put it on our colleagues to come up with creative things. So one of the ideas that you had was a flat Lisa, which was taking essentially a picture of our chief compliance officer and inviting our colleagues during compliance week to, do a caption and a selfie with the Lisa photo. And we were really hoping that people wouldn't abuse the situation and put Lisa in sort of awful situations. And luckily they didn't. And another thing that we did was set up a team spirit type, team photo and a compliance caption and, applying local flair. And so I think we had Mardi Gras colors coming in from New Orleans clinic and stuff like that. And then something that I did with our compliance officer in Canada was inviting colleagues to enter a contest to do a poster for compliance awareness. And what came through was just incredible. There was a really cool one, which was, I think, a Better Call Saul reference. And our compliance officer there is called Simon, and it was Better Call Simon and sort of, and Simon's face. And I just thought it was amazing, the response that we got. It was unexpected. People really got into the spirit of it. And then so for this Canada one, I asked Simon, the colleagues will vote for a winner, but please can you use every submission for something so that, their creativity doesn't go to waste and that they can take pride in being a part of the compliance program. So that's one tip I would give is, especially if you're, not super creative, flip it to your stakeholders and invite them to be creative and see what comes in. I know we were very pleasantly surprised for our compliance week at the number of, especially the clinics, like the people working in the, administering treatments to patients, they would coordinate themselves and take photos outside of the clinic, of course, because we respect HIPAA, and, choose a really cool scenic location in their city. And it was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, that was a lot of fun. That was a really great compliance week, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. People really got into it. I thought it was really, really, really good feedback.
Yeah.
And engagement. Yep.
Well, thank you for your subject matter expertise there. So one of the saddest times for me working in the US business, and I still remember this day really well. You and I were walking through the car park, and it was a cloudy day, or what do you say in America, the parking lot. And you told me that you had just accepted a job and would be moving from Massachusetts to New Jersey. And I was so thrilled for you because the opportunity was awesome. But on the other hand, you were a lunch buddy, you were an, after work drinks buddy, you were my person injecting some flavor to our compliance week. And that was a bummer. But let's not dwell on that.
I feel like I've really scarred you.
It was a bummer. I think these are big decisions, and obviously our listeners are familiar, I think, with me making the cross-border decisions. I'd love to hear from you, though. Someone who doesn't sort of move at that type of pace. This is big, and your husband was involved. All your family's out here in Massachusetts. So, for anyone who's in this position, and there are a lot of people who I think are like, "Oh, I'd never move from my family," or "This is home." And I was one of those people. I never thought I'd leave Wellington, and then it's been 11 years and 4 countries later, and here I am. So sometimes just the seed needs to be planted, that seed of openness, and not being scared. So what is it that swayed you to be open-minded about uprooting yourself and trying someplace new?
Sure. I mean, I think, of course, the career advancement for me was a big draw, being able to head up a region, especially the United States and Canada, which is always a big piece of the company, and really unique with the risk profile and everything like that. I think the stage of the program here gave me opportunities to be able to actually build out a program, not just for North America, but also to have influence globally, which I really appreciated. I've worked as the head of ethics and compliance for North America, and also as the subject matter lead for our healthcare compliance program globally. So being able to implement some global level standards to me was just a fascinating opportunity to learn more about other cultures and to really broaden my personal knowledge and expertise. The initial reason that drew me was actually my first leader when I came in here, Michaela. She was speaking at the same conference that I was, and I really appreciated her talk on the importance of responsible leadership in the compliance space and how that really is the center of everything, because we can put in all the policies and training that we want to do, but if people don't actually choose to embrace positive values and actually lead responsibly, none of it matters, honestly, if people don't actually do it. So I think that was really a unique approach, and that was what drew me to working with her in particular. I thought that she would have been a really great mentor for me, and I really was looking for that in my next step in leadership. And really just being able to have an impact. I felt like no matter what I would do, and I guess I realized this more after I left, but once I got here, but that really there was a great opportunity to have an impact on the I guess you could say on the culture and on how compliance was perceived in the company in that leadership role. You can really work to set the tone and collaborate with other leaders in the region to be able to set that culture and really work on that culture of compliance together. And to me, being able to have that impact was what swayed me to come here. But I would say that was for just me personally, but I still think that there was really, being able to have that support at home. My husband was very supportive of me in my role to move. He was willing to uproot, leave a job he loved, leave all of his friends and family. And he'd never left Massachusetts before. I'd at least, been places for, I left the state for school and grew up in another state, and I'd been around a little bit. But he'd never left Massachusetts. So he was willing to come here and start fresh as well. And to me, that was a huge part of it, because to be able to have that support as you go was just critical for me. I don't think I would have gone if there wouldn't have been an agreement there and a support there. So I think that was a big piece of it, but honestly, to me, it was just so exciting to be able to have that level of impact. I mean, you think about the decisions that we make every day that really help to shape the company and help to guide people to embrace the principles of compliance and ethics more than anything. To me, it was just an inspirational opportunity, and I couldn't pass it up. So that's how I got here. But I was really sad to leave all my friends at Fresenius, you in particular.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So no regrets, would you say?
No regrets. It is New Jersey and it has kind of a bad rap, but I will say it doesn't all look like Newark. Sorry, Newark. But actually New Jersey, I found really, really surprising. Everybody here has been really kind and warm, and just a really, really nice place to live. And I really like it. But I will say right after we moved here, we were on lockdown. So I think only recently have I been able to explore and really meet a lot of those people and engage, because I think a month after we closed on the house, everything was shut down for, I don't know, until almost now, I guess. But but no regrets for leaving. I think that it was a really good opportunity, and if I had to make the same decision again, I would have done the same thing. I think it was a really, really wonderful opportunity to just jump up and give it a try. And, sort of like I've approached some other things. If I didn't like it and didn't work, then try something else.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But for me, I think that it was a really great opportunity and a great challenge for me. And I'm still really, really inspired to do the work and to build out a really good program. So no regrets.
Awesome. And in case anyone is wondering, yes, that is Michaela Alberg of Compliance Fab that was Alexis's first boss. So unsurprising that was such a persuasive factor for you. And I think, I went to visit you for a long weekend a while back, and I was pleasantly surprised as well with New Jersey. And I think, one of the things that I said to you guys was, it doesn't suck. It's not terrible.
Exactly. It's actually really, really nice. I feel like where I am, it reminds me a lot of New Hampshire. I don't know. It's really nice.
Yeah, and we've even talked recently about a follow-up visit. So,
absolutely.
Do not discount New Jersey, folks. It is somewhat Mary approved.
At least one of the restaurants, right?
Exactly. Well, the final question that I have for you, Alexis, is what is your best productivity hack?
Okay. It's a 2-part hack. So I had to think about this one for a second. So the first is to focus on one thing at a time, because what I found is that I tend to have, a multi-page to-do list at all times, and it can get really distracting if you leave up your email and you get the pings happening and then your phone's doing the pinging. And so the first thing is to just pick one project to work on for a period of time. And the second thing is, you may have already heard about this. A lot of people use it, but it's called the Pomodoro Method, or tomato. You can go to tomatotimer.com. I think they have one. I just have an app on my phone. But what it does is it chunks up your time, and it actually sets a timer for a period of time to focus. So it'll be, say, 25 minutes of focus, and then it'll give you a 5-minute break and periodically, or then it'll give you a longer break. And you can set it up however you want to do it. But to me, I sometimes find that there are tasks that I want to put off because they're not every, I'm really inspired by my job, but we all have those tasks that sometimes are not the fun ones. They're like more administrative, or, doing things like doing your expense report, whatever it is. And you need to get it done. And so for me, being able to say, I can focus on this one thing for 25 minutes, and then I get a 5-minute coffee break, or, go sit outside for a few minutes and then focus back in, to me was a really nice way to force myself to sit down and get things done. And I found that that's been the way to get to just like power through things and get them done, is to be able to just do that in measurable increments, to be able to get that focus time and just knock it out. And that's been the way I've done a lot of things that have been really important. I'll sometimes even clear my schedule for a day and just block it out from meetings, and actually just sit there and go through and get and tick some things off. And that's been the greatest thing for me, because otherwise you get caught up and you're in meetings all day. And the next thing you know, it's 6:00 at night. You've been in 8 meetings and done nothing other than talk to people, which is, important, important part of the job. Right. But it doesn't always move the ball forward.
Right.
It's really important to be able to be in that advisory role, but sometimes there are things you just really need to get done. So that's what I've done.
Awesome. That's really helpful. Thank you. I'm sure several of us are going to be Googling that afterwards. So good tip. Well, sure. Alexis, we've come to the end of the episode. It was awesome having a chance to work with you again. And thank you so much for your time and knowledge sharing today. It's so appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Great Women in Compliance. We hope you'll join us in honoring the great women in the compliance field by subscribing to this podcast and leaving a review.